that you please sign the attendance roster before you leave if you haven't done so already. And please be sure to take a index card and fill it out with a question that you might have for the candidates, and we'll be collecting those shortly. We also want to continue to provide you with neighborhood news and information. So again, that is why it's important for you to do a sign-in at the sign-in sheet and put your information. You can also visit our website at grandneighborhoodalliance.com or follow us on our Facebook page at Grand Neighborhood Alliance Riverside. This is the fourth in the series of forums that were held with the candidates over the past 2 months. The Ward 1 Neighborhoods United partnered with the various neighborhoods in the Ward 1 area and to sponsor this candidate forum. And it'll help assist you voters in learning more about the candidates that are running for city council representative. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our 2019 Ward 1 City Council candidates, Mike Gardner, Philip Falcone, and Aaron Edwards. Tonight we'll be hearing answers to your questions from these candidates for the Riverside City Council Ward 1. Election day is Tuesday, June 4th. This is an all-mail ballot election. Ballots must be postmarked no later than election day or deposited at a ballot drop-off location by 8 p.m. on election day, June 4th. This election has one difference. Given a new state law, municipal elections must be consolidated with statewide primary and general election dates. In order to accommodate the adjustment from odd to even numbered year elections, this term of office will be 5 years instead of 4. Just before the forum, the candidates drew numbers for speaking order. They are seated from left to right according to that drawing. We'll alternate who goes first as we move on to audience questions. Along with questions gathered by tonight's hosting neighborhood group, we'll be also taking the audience questions during this time. We have volunteers ready to pick up or distribute cards. So please raise your hand if you need a card or if you have a card to be picked up. And we'll give a last call for questions after the candidate's opening statement. If we don't get to your question, you will have time to speak individually with the candidates following the forum from 8 to 8:30. Now let's get underway. Our moderator tonight is Tom Hunt, a local businessman and 12-year member of the Riverside Unified School District School Board.
Thank you for inviting me, Councilman Parker. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I just want to tell you all in Ward 1 how much I admire how you were so involved in Ward 1 in the 4th debate, and you're the heart of our old city. And in just one citizen's opinion, Ward 1 is probably the most difficult and challenging of any ward to represent because it includes business, it includes homes, it includes the older part, and so we have a great decision to make with these three fine people. Let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to do this. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Candidates will have 90 seconds to answer audience questions and the questions I'm going to propose that the committee has put together. We will finish up with 1 minute closing statements from each candidate. I'd like to introduce our timekeeper, and that's Tom and Cheryl. Here, hi Cheryl, how are you?
Good.
Cheryl, the most important person in the room. She has a stopwatch.
He has a watch.
Oh, he does. Right,
He's
Tom.
good at tapping.
Just a couple of ground rules. Candidates, don't feel pressured to use all the time allotted for each question. When you're satisfied with your answer, we're happy to move on. As I said, we will stop if you run over, Cheryl. And audience, we ask you to hold your applause to the end of the forum. Simple reason, we want to use as much time possible to have them answer, our candidates answer your questions. We'll begin opening statements here in a minute, and at the end of opening statements, we'll give last call, as Ms. Varga mentioned, for any questions. So, we have opening statements starting in 2 minutes. Mr. Mike Gardner. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you. Thank you to the Grand Neighborhood Alliance for organizing this, and all of you for coming this evening to listen to us. I am Mike Gardner. I'm currently serving as your first ward council member. It's been an honor and privilege to serve you these last 3 terms. I think I've done a good job for you, and I'd like to do it for at least 1 more term. I came to Riverside New Year's Day 1971 to complete my education at UCR. I graduated with a dual major in 1972, went to grad school, met my wife while I was in school, got married, had a family, went to work for Southern California Edison Company, and they were in Rosemead. I did not want to go to Rosemead. I wanted to stay living in Riverside, so I commuted to Rosemead for 18 years until I changed positions in Edison and worked closer to home. But I have been a Riverside resident since I first came here New Year's Day 1971. While I've been on the council, Riverside has made great strides. We've opened the UCR Medical School, seen our 3 universities through major expansions, and watched Riverside Community College grow and thrive. We successfully recruited the Air Resources Board testing labs and the UC System accounting and payroll offices, bringing badly needed higher level jobs to the area and helping students graduating from our universities and RCC gain employment locally rather than having to leave to find work. We've renovated and expanded the convention center, renovated and reopened the Fox Theater, improved the municipal auditorium. We have broken ground on a new main library and the Cheech Marion Center for Chicano Art, Culture, and Industry will follow. We're seeing an explosion of new housing and hotel development in our downtown, and that fuels more development across the city. And I think Mike just, there we go. So, that's it, thank you.
All right, and Mr. Falcone, you're next.
I would like to thank the Grand Neighborhood Alliance for hosting us this evening. It's great to be in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and a neighborhood where so many of my longtime friends are very active in. 14 years ago, I would not have imagined myself sitting here before you today. My family arrived in Riverside after Hurricane Katrina with only 5 days worth of clothing in our suitcases. The generosity, though, of this community got us back on our feet and offered new opportunities. I went on to become a true product of this community, the only candidate that can say that. I've worked in the mayor's office, experiencing firsthand how our city operates, and I currently serve you as a city commissioner on the Cultural Heritage Board. For these opportunities and experiences, I am deeply grateful to this community. This gratitude leads me to give back by further serving you on the City Council. Riverside is my passion, and I recognize that we face significant 21st century challenges that require fresh, innovative thinking to maintain our city's beauty and vitality for future generations. My vision for Riverside focuses on the long term, ending cycles of short-sighted decisions. I envision modernized infrastructure to sustain our neighborhoods for the future. I envision responsible development that brings high-quality jobs while preserving our city's unique charm. I envision a comprehensive homelessness plan that focuses on working with our regional partners to ensure residents enjoy a higher quality of life. I offer you honest, decisive, forward-thinking leadership that will engage the community and build consensus on these and other pressing issues. I ask for your support so together we can make this vision a reality for our ward. Thank you very much.
And now the opening statement was Aaron Edwards.
Thank you so much for being here. Is the mic on? Okay, great.
A few years ago, I took a blank notebook and started meeting with people all over the city, longtime Riversiders, people who moved here for a job, neighbors, business owners, and I asked everyone 2 questions. What do you love about Riverside? And what would make it even better? I've since filled 3 notebooks. These answers have inspired me to run for City Council, to put my particular skills to work at this critical and exciting time in our city. Having knocked on thousands of doors in our ward, many in this neighborhood, I have heard and I observe that homelessness is the biggest issue facing Riverside. I have over a decade of work experience addressing this very issue in the nonprofit sector, managing budgets and people, leading and funding new approaches to this and other complex issues, bringing stability to organizations in times of change, and driving better results even in the face of shrinking resources.
On City Council, I will address homelessness in both the short and the long term. My campaign has even been endorsed by the nurses of Riverside Community Hospital, who see the daily impact and the expense of treating homelessness from the emergency room. On City Council, I will also invest in neighborhoods. From the streets to the trees, during the day, at night, everyone wants to feel secure and connected where they live. And I will put Riverside on the map, which means setting forward-thinking policies and fostering regional partnerships to create good jobs, to support local businesses, and to step into our role as the city of arts and innovation. I look forward to your questions this evening.
Thank you.
I'm going to just go in the same order.
I think my mic really does work, doesn't it? And we'll start with Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner, do you think downtown Riverside is healthy and successful? If not, what would you do to change that?
I think downtown Riverside is healthy and successful, and I think it's getting more so. For many years, downtown Riverside pretty much closed when the courts and the businesses and the governmental offices closed at 5 o'clock. And you didn't go downtown except to do things you're not supposed to do. Your parents would have told you not to go there. You would tell your children not to go there after dark. We are now to the point where we have one brand new hotel under construction will open this fall. We have renovated the convention center. A number of major projects are occurring in the downtown. Several of them are residential or include residential components. And that's important because that brings the resources that we would like to see in our city to Riverside. Part of what brings different sorts of development, stores that you would like, that sort of thing, come based on the population that you have, both density and available income in it. And we're improving dramatically in that area. There really is a good life in downtown Riverside now. More places to eat, more places to go for entertainment, and it draws people from young students, families with children, through older folks. There's something for everyone downtown.
Mr. Falcone?
Our downtown surely has come a long way. However, there is still much more to be addressed. And when I am downtown talking to various small business owners, for example, they feel failed by current leadership. The reason they feel failed by current leadership is because as downtown has continued to progress and change over the last 12 plus years, the small businesses have felt forced out of some of the key critical decision-making and discussions that were going on in terms of how downtown will continue to progress and move forward into the future. Riverside has long since been dubbed, one of the things it has been dubbed as is a small business community. And if our downtown is not representative of that, if our downtown vendors and merchants do not feel valued as well as liberated to be active in the decision-making processes for our city, we have not lived up to that specific title. I also think it's important in terms of downtown for the long-term vision that we focus on bringing in industries, both encouraging small business, but also bringing in the industries that will keep young people and young professionals here spending money and attract people to come to our downtown and spend money. We have to ensure that as we continue to grow and develop, it is done in a responsible way. And if I were to point out one of the most irresponsible forms of development that we've currently had in our downtown and why it has not lived up to all the potential that it has, is our lack of affordable housing options in our downtown. While yes, residential is growing, it's beyond a touchable price point for the average citizen of Riverside.
Ms. Edwards.
The downtown is my neighborhood, and I am very excited about where the downtown is growing. I imagine many of you have had an opportunity to hear about or go to the Food Lab, which is within walking distance of my house. And one of the reasons that I know that downtown is going in a good direction is the very first weekend that Food Lab was open, one of the things they needed to buy more of was high chairs, because there were so many families that for the first time were able to come out and spend time together with their children, with other families. I was very excited to see that. And actually, we have a changing demographic in downtown. Within a 3-mile radius of the downtown core, the average age is 29 years old. Families that look a lot like mine. At the same time, I talked to a woman the other day who told me that she doesn't feel safe after dark in downtown Riverside alone, and that concerns me as a parent, as a resident, as a downtown neighbor. And for me, what that means is we need to, on City Council, which I commit to doing, invest in local business communities to make sure that they are supported, that they can stay open longer, later, that we're looking at how to make downtown full of light and a safer place for everyone, and how to make it even more walkable, full of green space for families, tourists, everyone to be part of a growing and changing downtown.
Thank you. Candace, I should have said that if you'd like me to repeat the question, any of you that are doing this, please just ask me. I like this next question. It reminds us that when you run for office, you're a public servant. So starting with Mr. Falcone. Mr. Falcone, would you answer this question? How do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our city?
I think our first and foremost, most critical area in which the councilperson can have direct impact on the community's involvement in various decision-making processes for the city is to truly be a facilitator with various neighborhood groups, to ensure that the various neighborhood groups that exist in Ward 1 have a voice through the representation of the elected councilperson. That's the absolute bare minimum, is starting with that component. I think on a larger scale, there is great value that comes with and the great responsibility that comes with the role of a councilperson by the appointments that they make to the various city boards and commissions. We have over roughly 150 board and commission members across the city, and Ward 1 is represented on each of those boards, and it is, I think, very important to ensure that the appointments to these various boards are indicative of the specific neighborhoods and residents that live in the ward. That is one way that you appoint individuals to serve on boards and commissions that then seek to advise the city council. I'm fortunate to serve as a city commissioner, and I know many times the challenge that we as city commissioners are faced with is we are oftentimes, our thoughts and our sentiments and our votes through the various agenda items are ignored once they go to the city council. It is important that the various representatives that are appointed to advise the city council, that we elect city council people that are willing and dedicated to listening to the areas of expertise in which these various city commissioners offer.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Ms. Edwards.
Resident voices are extremely important to local government, especially to me. I am a member of the Downtown Area Neighborhood Alliance, a member of the Northside Improvement Association, so I am a resident who is very involved in my community and in our ward. And I know how important it is to me to have a voice and to know that my voice is being heard. I also have experience within the nonprofit sector leading teams, leading processes with communities to make sure that we're working toward a common goal to determine what those goals are and the way that we want to approach goals together. So I would offer exactly the same as a council member on Riverside City Council. I have two ways in particular that I'm excited about doing this here in Riverside in our ward. The first is neighborhood councils, which would provide a formal system of accountability from neighborhood groups to council members. Now residents can voice opinions, but there isn't always that accountability. I'd like to see that structure in place so decisions are made from the ground up, not the other way. And also, I'm very interested in experimenting with participatory budgeting here in Riverside, which I've seen work in other cities where I have lived, which means that residents identify their priorities, vote upon them, and unless there are any major red flags, City Council approves those budgetary priorities because people where they live know best what they need. They just need the money to do it.
Thank you. The Grand Neighborhood Alliance has some very good questions. I like this. So candidates. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gregor. Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Gregor. I think there's how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our city, Mr. Gregor?
Thank you. It is critical that we involve all of you in the decision making because after all, we represent all of you. There are 6 neighborhood groups in Ward 1. I've helped found 2 of them. This is one. I attend almost all of their meetings, and any meeting that I am unable to attend, you will find Lynn. You'll find her at most of them with me. I have a reputation of being open, accessible, and responsive. My city business card, which all of you pay for, has my city cell phone number on it. All of my printed literature has my city cell phone number. I'm sorry, my campaign literature has my personal cell phone number on it. I put out periodically something called a Ward 1 update. It's an electronic newsletter, it's things that are happening in the city that are important. My city email and city cell phone number are on that. Our council just last night made what I thought was a bad decision in terms of public involvement. The council voted 4-3 to defeat my motion to maintain our current city council meeting schedule, and instead adopted a motion to cut the meeting schedule in half, so we'll go from 4 meetings a month to 2 meetings a month. And I think that's a mistake and a disservice to you.
I was excited about that question, I apologize. So we're going to see about your imaginations and things. You've been in office now 1 month, and you were told by the city manager that Ward 1 has received a $1 million grant to use in any way that you want. So, starting with Ms. Edwards, what would you do with it and why?
Well, the first thing I would do is be as open, transparent, and as excited as possible about the opportunity, because as I mentioned in my previous answer, it's not about what I want to do with it, it's what community members hope to do with it. So this could be a great way to try participatory budgeting out and to come together with the different neighborhood groups, see what the priorities are, and have neighbors vote on which priorities rise to the top, talk about how they would be feasible, and go from there. I personally, as a resident, would love to see pocket parks, more areas for play in Riverside throughout the ward. I think that this would really encourage all of us to come out more, to meet each other, to feel more secure and connected where we live. But I would really be guided by the community for how this money would be spent.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner?
$1 million sounds like a very large amount of money to me. But really for city level projects, it won't go that far. I agree that the smart thing to do would be to work with the residents and try to figure out what are their priorities. I'm pretty sure that the priorities would include things like better tree trimming, better street maintenance, better sidewalk maintenance, the kinds of basic everyday city services that I think you had in mind when those of you who voted for Measure Z, once the sales tax increase, voted for it. And our council did not put, I don't think, enough of the early dollars in Measure Z revenue into those services. They elected instead to do some internal financial housekeeping things, which are important, but I would have put more dollars into the services that you see and want and need up front. So I think that's where you would want those dollars to go, but I would come with neighborhood groups, I would put out a Ward 1 update, and I would ask for input on what would you like to see extra money spent on.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone?
We of course need to survey the various neighborhoods and the various residents to see where the specific needs lie. I know, speaking from my experience of walking this ward and walking every neighborhood and talking to many residents, that would always seem to be a common thread in terms of, what are some of your greatest concerns in terms of city services and things that are being offered by the city. And it always has come down to potholes, road repair, infrastructure needs, some of our most critical responsibilities of government that really, because of leadership, has been chronically deferred, much of the infrastructure needs. So while $1 million is not much, it can fill a lot of potholes and it can address some of the most critical infrastructure needs in the current situation that we are in. But I think time and time again, as I've spoken to residents, infrastructure and replacement and filling of potholes and critical road repairs have been at the forefront of their concerns.
Thank you. Well, citizens, we are a charter city. So candidates, there are several upcoming charter review committee meetings scheduled for the remainder of this year. What amendments to the current city charter would you propose to be placed on the November ballot? Let's start with Mr. Gardner, please.
Well, it's not really for me to propose that. That's for the Charter Review Commission to do after they listen to you. But I'll tell you some things I think are important and that I think the Charter Review Commission should pay attention to. Probably the first and most obvious of those is what is the mayor's veto authority? We've had a challenge to that. The mayor attempted to cast a veto of a contract extension for our former city manager. He was advised by the city attorney he did not have the authority to do that. The mayor pointed to language in the charter that if you read just that little bit, it says, yes, he does. If you read the charter as a whole, I believe, and many others do as well, that the charter does not intend for the mayor to be able to have a veto authority in anything having to do with the three, what we call charter officers, the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk, who are hired by and serve at the pleasure of the city council, not the mayor. The mayor doesn't get a vote in hiring, firing, or disciplining those employees. So that would be the first one. Another one that I think is important to are street trees. The charter says street trees are under the jurisdiction of the Park Recreation and Community Services Department and a subcommittee of the Park Recreation and Community Services Commission. And that's not the way it works. It's actually handled by Public Works. We should clarify both of those.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone.
Part of this lies in the beauty that is the Charter Review Commission. The Charter Review Commission is a commission that comes together every 8 years. One of those commissions that I mentioned earlier that is in fact appointed by the City Council and the Mayor, or individuals that can serve and help fine-tune some of these discrepancies in the Charter. Of course, I think that the Mayor's veto has been at the forefront of many people's minds, especially over the course of the last year or so. It made it across the headlines and was very well known across the city. So we absolutely, the Charter Review Commission and the City Council need to work comprehensively at fine-tuning that and letting that be known to the public in terms of how they see it to be fit in terms of the Charter. So of course, Mayor's veto is a big one. And I'm going to divide the second one into two subcategories. I think it's just a brief overlook. It always is important to fine-tune various language. As every 8 years when we review the charter, we need to ensure that the various language is as clear as possible, just because as time progresses, there is going to be that component. I think the larger piece, though, is when you look at our city charter, not all of the various boards and commissions that we have are outlined and described and proposed with their various responsibilities. I think it is important to really delineate what our various board and commissions seek to do, their various roles. Currently, only about half are outlined in the charter, and we need to include, I think, the larger piece of the various boards and commissions in our city.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards?
I agree that clarifying the mayor's veto power is very important, particularly now. I'd also like to see in the charter review a discussion about term limits for council members and possibly even campaign contribution limits as well. In addition, I'd like us to take a look at the commissions that we have as a city and think about what commissions might be missing. For example, might we need in Riverside a women's commission? Might we need to look again at having a commission on sustainability, as we know that we may be facing challenges in the future? And I would love Riverside as a city of arts and innovation to be really on the forefront of what a sustainable green city can look like. So I would love to see all of those pieces included in conversations about the charter, in addition to clarifying who can serve on commissions and making sure that we are removing as many barriers as possible so people with all kinds of lived experience are able to participate in our commissions. That is what makes us rich, and that is what makes us thrive in the city.
Thank you, Candace. The next question is a two-part question, and it talks about the quality of our neighborhood, the quality of our life and enjoyment. So starting with Mr. Falcone, how would you encourage the strengthening and enforcement of city regulations to make businesses, tenants, and homeowners to keep their property clean? And how does the homeless situation play into that when they are often found capped in business alcoves, neighborhood alleys, and river bottoms
I think first and foremost, it is the critical responsibility of local government to ensure public safety and to ensure that various both business owners, businesses, as well as homeowners feel safe and secure in their various neighborhoods. So we have to ensure the city council is providing the necessary support to our first responders, to our public safety officials, to ensure that the safety component is there. That should always be at the forefront of our minds and our decision-making processes. When it comes to the various city regulations and ordinances, in terms of ensuring that safety is provided, we have to, of course, look to the various ordinances that are in existence to protect the various properties, the private properties of both the homeowners and the business owners, and ensure that those are enforced upon. We also, though, have to balance the various laws that have been sent our way, sent towards Riverside from the state level, as well as a more national, regional level. We have been faced with some significant legal decisions that have been sent to Riverside that we now have to ensure that we abide by. One of them in particular is that, and this is getting somewhere in the weeds of the homeless topic, but one of it being that if you do not have a shelter bed or some form of services to provide a homeless individual, we, from a city standpoint, are not permitted to force them off of whether it be city properties such as sidewalks or in front of businesses that do not have posted signage. That's a difficult challenge that we're faced with from a larger level that's above Riverside. And we have to work together to address that.
Sorry, I didn't.
Good work on that. Ms. Edwards.
When I moved into my home in Heritage Square, our neighbors were struggling to pay rent for several months and had invited friends of theirs who were also struggling to come live on the property with them. And so what that means is that for several months we lived next door to and met new neighbors who were living in what was essentially a cardboard box about this far away from the wall of our baby's room. And when it would rain, the roof of the box would cave in and you could hear people yelling as everything that they owned was washed away. And so, we talk a lot about homelessness and what we do and do not want in our own backyards. Homelessness is in our backyard. And so we need to, as a city, be bold and brave to find innovative ways to address homelessness. And I hope there's another question that will address this specifically. But when it comes to the first part of the question, which is about properties and code enforcement, when I look at the data out of Philadelphia learned that some of these problem properties actually cost the city $20 million every single year when you look at all of the services needed to address them. So clearly this can be a big cost drain on the city, and we need to find ways to get ahead of it. Cities like Memphis have put together public-private partnerships that are, I find, quite admirable. And what that does is it would work with the property owner to see if there were any barriers and help to reduce those barriers.
All right. As a member of the city council, of course, you're a member of 7, but we're going to stay in Ward 1. This is about your own advocacy. I'm sorry, Mr. Gardner, I think that's I'm not terrible, I'm sorry.
I admit I may know more, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to me. There are regulations on maintaining private property. Those are generally enforced by code enforcement. And they're there for a reason. We all want our neighborhoods to look good. We want our neighbor's house to look good. We don't want anybody to be unnecessarily overbearing. And code enforcement will almost always work with somebody who will work with them. You cannot spend taxpayer money maintaining private property. I can't spend your money having the city have somebody mow my yard. I gotta take care of that myself. So having the city do things on private property is legally limited, and I think should be. In terms of dealing with people camping on private property or on public property for that matter, different rules. On private property, the property owner is responsible for the maintenance, and they have the authority to say to a person who is trespassing on their property, you need to get off my property, and the police department will remove a person if a person won't go. That typically includes the alcoves to a business, although not the sidewalk in front. There is a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that says if you don't have a shelter bed to offer a person, you cannot remove them from public property simply for being there.
Let's make sure your moderator gets this right this time. This next question will start with Ms. Edwards and go to Mr. Gardner and then Mr. Falcone. Measure C that we all passed recently, the 1% extra sales tax, was really sold on and for us on public safety. So, starting Ms. Edwards, as a downtown Ward 1 council person, what would you do to make sure that there was more police presence in our Ward 1 neighborhoods and public safety, public spaces to ensure our safety and quiet enjoyment?
When I talk to the police chief, he tells me that 50% of the calls that they receive are actually about homelessness. And by and large, homelessness is a social issue, it's not a criminal one. So if we as a city can be smart and thoughtful about the ways that police resources are being used and find other ways to address homelessness in the city, then we free up police resources to do the jobs that police have been trained to do well. And I admire the processes that have been started with the homelessness outreach teams. I think that will help significantly to free up space for police to do very important police work to keep our neighborhoods safe and to make sure we all have what we need to feel secure and connected when we live.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner.
I think there are several pieces that people are not really aware of, or not sufficiently aware of here. First is your council, as part of the planning for spending the Measure Z revenue that comes from the 1 cent sales tax increase, set a goal of hiring 60 additional street police officers over the first 5 years of Measure Z funding. We have in place now over 25 of those officers. We have the remainder of our schedule. It was 17 first year, 16 the second year, and then 16, 15 in succeeding years to get to the 60. We have adequate officers in the academy today to get to this year's total. So we are on track. In the North Policing area, which we are a part of, we have 4 regular patrol officers. On Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, we have 4 additional patrol officers. We have 4 problem-oriented policing officers that are dedicated to this part of our city, plus detectives, plus 2 sergeants, plus the lieutenant who's the area commander for the area. Other policing areas in the city have 4 patrol officers, 2 problem-oriented police officers, and they don't get the extra 4 on the heavy nights.
Mr. Falcone, I'm just going to ask the question again so that just make sure you and I understand. What would you do to make sure there are more police presence in our neighborhoods and public safety to ensure our safety of our neighborhoods and our quiet enjoyment?
Over the last several years, when I have been attending all the various Ward 1 neighborhood group meetings, time and time again I've heard, of course, the expressing from various neighbors that the lack of patrolling in their various neighborhoods all across the board is subpar to what they find that it should be. And I think what is important, there's a couple of things to acknowledge in that sentiment. The first thing is that one council person, of course, cannot dictate to, whether it be the larger city council or city management, of where exactly to, or in this case, the police department, where exactly to spend the specific resources. That has to be a larger vote from the council. And so what I pledge to do on the city council is to ensure that with the new city council that will be coming in shortly, that we do have a common goal when it comes to downtown is everyone's downtown. Downtown is everyone's neighborhood, and in many cases, with downtown being in Ward 1, there is a greater need there. We have to ensure that there is a consensus being built on this new city council to ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction, to ensure that we all have an eye on a similar prize, and part of that prize would ensure then that the necessary protection and police presence that perhaps needs to be in downtown or other Ward 1 neighborhoods is acknowledged. And that is going to come back to having similar goals and mindsets across the city council, because that is who, in the end, votes for and ultimately decides where the most resources are spent across the city, as well as the police presence.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, I wanted to ask Ms. Fargo and Ms. Wallace, do we have the audience questions that I may have up here to be prepared? So we'll go to the next question. We're going to start with Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner, why are you running for city council? What experience do you have that would make you a qualified council person? And what makes you the best candidate?
I'm running because this is a job I truly enjoy. In my career, I've had lots and lots of jobs, and I can honestly say that being a council member is the most fun, challenging, and rewarding job I've ever had. Not the most lucrative, which is probably a good thing. I have 12 years experience being a council member. I spent 6 years on the Community Police Review Commission before I was elected to the council. I have been on 2 mayor's task forces before I was elected to the council. I've been a community leader since the 1980s, when I was heavily involved in planning and implementing the closing and capping of the landfill, which, as all of you know, is right behind us. That was a real big project, and there were thousands of trucks that came through our neighborhoods to accomplish that closing and capping. I think I do a good job, and I think most of you think I do a pretty good job. I would ask you to ask yourself the question, have I served you well? If I have, I'd ask you to return me to office so I can continue to do that. Have I done something so egregious that you think I need to be replaced? If your answer to that is yes, pick one of these other 2 candidates. But I think I've done a good job for you. I'd like to continue doing it.
Mr. Falcone.
So why run? That's always the most important question for a candidate, to know your why. And I alluded to much of that in my opening statement. When my family first came to Riverside, during the lowest point of our lives, with 5 days worth of clothing in our suitcases, this community opened up their hearts, and in many cases opened up their wallets to donate various things that my family needed to get back up on our feet. And I believe now, fast forward almost 15 years later, that I owe this city a debt of gratitude. That's really my why. My why is I want to turn around and return the favor and give back to this community that has given so much to me and my family. When it comes to the experience to serve on the city council, I think what is very important is that each person that comes to the city council offers a unique viewpoint. I am presenting a unique generational viewpoint that is not currently on the city council and has not previously been on the city council. We have, of course, spoken about the change in demographics in Ward 1, and that demographic is exactly the demographic in which I fit into. And it is important that we have that generational viewpoint on the city council. I've spoken about my time serving as a city commissioner. I serve on 15 different other boards and commissions across the city. So I'm very dedicated to this community. In closing, the why, are you the right choice? I ask you, and I've asked this to many neighbors, are we better off now than we were 12 years ago? And the fact of the matter is, by and large, people say no. Our challenges have gotten worse. Homelessness has risen. Infrastructure has gotten worse. We are not better off, and now is the time for change.
Thank you. And Ms. Edwards.
I've dedicated my career to service. I got my start in front of a high school classroom helping low-income high school students get into college. I went on to get my master's degree in international development. And since that time, I have led and managed a $7 million portfolio of health investments for United Way, have funded programs for foster care youth, have led a network of soup kitchens, food pantries, and homeless shelters. And it's the same dedication to service that has inspired me to run for Riverside City Council. And when I walk our ward from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top, I hear that homelessness is the biggest issue we're facing as a city. And if that is true, we must have someone on our city council who has proven experience working with this issue in the past. Also, as I mentioned, downtown Riverside is growing and changing with families that look a lot like mine. We need someone on city council who represents Riverside and where we're going. I have become very involved in my community here. I'm a board member of the Riverside Downtown Partnership, where I sit on the land use committee. I'm a member of many neighborhood groups, as I mentioned. I chair the board of a local nonprofit, where I sit on the finance committee. And finally, why am I running? Riverside is my home. We purchased our first home here. We're raising our daughter here. Running for city council is the best way I can think of to really invest in this community and make it a better place.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. This question is going to be divided up a little bit because the incumbent has a different answer than the challengers. We're going to start with Mr. Falcone. Mr. Falcone, if you are elected, what are your 2 top goals for our city? And I'll ask you to also award one.
I think first and foremost, we must be focusing on the homelessness challenge that we are facing all across the city. This is not just a Ward 1 issue, and it's even not just a City of Riverside issue. It is a much larger issue. And so I'm proposed to address this in a comprehensive manner, acknowledging that Riverside alone cannot solve this challenge. We must work more comprehensively with our regional partners to leverage the existing resources to address some of the underlying causes of homelessness. That includes mental health, that includes substance abuse, that includes job insecurity and lack of affordable housing. All of those things feed into some of the most pressing challenges in terms of the homelessness that we are faced with. That is, I think, first, number 1 priority. Second is infrastructure. I've spoken a lot about this evening, and I will continue to advocate for it because I believe it to be one of the most critical responsibilities of municipal government, to ensure that streets and sidewalks and trees and electrical lines and water pipes and mains are maintained in a way that are sustainable into the future. We have to have our eye on the future in Riverside, and those 2 things I spoke about, addressing homelessness as well as improving our infrastructure, are 2 ways that we can make 2 of the best investments in our future here in Riverside. And those are the 2 things I'm willing to advocate for on the City Council.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, your top 2 goals for our city in Ward 1.
As I mentioned, homelessness is our number 1 priority. And if we look at the number of people who are unsheltered every night, we're looking at around 400 people, around 2,000 people sheltered and unsheltered experiencing homelessness. Homelessness has many different faces, so it will take many different solutions. And if you look at Riverside in comparison to other cities in our region, we're actually at a place now where we can wrap our minds around this homelessness issue and do some creative and innovative work to address it in a way that we would be a leader in the whole region. So that is a priority of mine, thinking about how we can have more emergency options, how we can lean into our housing first policy, how we can focus on prevention, which means asking questions about how we can make housing more affordable, how we can find funding to make sure there's access to mental health care, for example. And my second priority would be doing a better job as a city of telling Riverside's story. And when we can do a better job of talking about what is extraordinary about this place, that is how we are able to create jobs, have scenarios where people live and work in the same place and avoid those long commutes on crowded highways. That's how we have a greener city that's more walkable. That's how tourists come, and that's why people move here and choose to stay.
Mr. Gardner, we're going to change up your question just a little bit because you are the incumbent. So for 12 years now, you've served us. So give us 2 things that you specifically think you've done that advance the city, and if re-elected, what would be your next 2 top goals?
Do I get 4 minutes?
No, sir.
Okay. So 2 of the top things I've done is looking in our downtown. We've done some really important things for our city. We finally broke ground on a new main library. We have attracted the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art, Culture, and Industry, which will go into the old library building. We are shortly going to be breaking ground on a really neat affordable housing project with a Civil Rights Institute attached to it. We have renovated the Fox Theater, we have renovated the municipal auditorium, we're in the process of renovating our city's museum. Huge amount of construction happening downtown. Parks is another thing that I'm really proud of. Bonominio Park was going to be a housing development. That was what was being pushed by my predecessor and part of why I was elected in the first place. It is now one of, I think, our very best parks. I'm very proud of that. I was successful in getting 17 and a half acres that my predecessor took out of Fairmont Park, put back into the park as park property. I got the county to give us Martha McLean and Zanera's Park, no cost to the city, except now we maintain it and do a much better job. And I think we do a better job overall in our neighborhoods. Our council is much more open and accessible, and I did play a role in that.
Thank you, sir. All right. This is a question that goes to our passion. I don't know if you can limit yourself to three, but starting with Ms. Edwards, what are the top three things that you love about the city of Riverside? And what are the top three things you wish to see changed and improved on here in the city?
Three things I love. I love the walkability of downtown. I love the big parks that we have, particularly the big parks here in Warren Lawn. I love that when I moved to Riverside, it didn't take more than 24 hours for my new neighbor to come over and introduce herself and ask if there was anything that I needed. I love that sense of community here. When I think about the three things that I would want to change in Riverside, there was an article that came out in the Press Enterprise today that talked about air quality in our region and the very poor air quality. And as a mother of a toddler who's been diagnosed with pre-asthma, I know what it's like to sit at 3 a.m. with a baby doing a breathing treatment. And I know that I'm not alone, that many mothers and families experience that. So I would want to see our air quality improved in this region. I would love to see not just big parks, but smaller parks spread throughout the ward and throughout the city. So for example, downtown, you could shop and stay in a park and go back and enjoy downtown more. And I would like to see, now that we have so many extraordinary assets in Riverside coming, like the Cheech, like the brand new library, and so many historical places here, that we do a better job as a city of connecting those assets to each other for tourists and for us to tell our story.
Okay. Mr. Gardner.
Things I love about Riverside, one is we're college town. We've got 3 big universities and RCC, which is a very big community college. That's what brought me here. It's part of what kept me here. Another thing that I really like about our city is, even though we are a pretty big city, we're about 330,000 people now, cover almost 83 square miles, we feel like a small town. Our neighborhoods are truly neighborhoods. People know each other, watch out for each other, and we're proud of it. I've been in my house that I'm in now for, this is my 45th year in that house. And I don't have any intention of moving from it. Another thing I really like about our city is the variety of things to do here. Everything from visiting parks, hiking Mount Rubidoux or the Box Springs, the various arts, theater, culture, all those kinds of things. Things I would like to see us do a better job of. We need more smart economic development that brings quality jobs here, to provide good jobs, good benefits for our young people coming out of school, to have people not have to commute out of the area so that they can work here. More public safety. We need to continue to add more public safety. We've done a good job of that with our Mission Z dollars, but we're not done. And last would be better public services, free training in streets, those things.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, 3 and 3.
The three things that I love about this city. First and foremost, I am most passionate about our history, our unique architecture, the various historical resources that we have here in this town. I think really are unparalleled to other cities in our region and elsewhere. So our history. But then on the flip side, second thing that I love is the opportunities that lie ahead. Our future is extremely bright in this town because of the influx and the change of demographics, as well as the various intellectual capital that we have here. So first was history, second was our future, third of the things I love in Riverside are the people. We all, I'm sure, some kind of way are connected to someone who knows someone in this town. It seems as if some kind of way we are all intertwined, and that is something I think that is remarkable about Riverside that other cities perhaps do not have. Some kind of way we are all intertwined here in this town. When it comes to three of the things I am prepared to advocate for or interested in changing, first, of course, is providing better infrastructure services, ensuring that we are looking at addressing some of those critical needs across our city. That's everything from things that are happening underground to above ground. And that also coincides with the traffic component and ensuring our roads are sustainable for the influx in traffic and how we mitigate traffic in town. Secondly, the responsible economic development component. We, of course, have to continue to grow and change, but we must do it in a responsible way, in a respectful way to both our unique history as well as our unique landscape here in town. And third, when it comes to things I'm ready to change, is to better represent our residents and to ensure that everyone has a voice in the decision making.
All right, now we're going to go to the audience questions, and my timekeepers and my very able audio man. It's 90 seconds now on these. So, Mr. Falcone, I believe you're next, is that right? You first? No, it's Mr. Gardner, I'm sorry. See? I like this question a lot as a school board member. So, yeah. There you go, thank you. Math was not my strong suit, focus on. All right. And as a student, a current youth of Ward 1, a constituent of Ward 1, I wanted to know who they are, what are you doing for youth homeless? For example, a friend of mine is homeless and has been rejected from programs for unknown reasons. Address youth homelessness again, Mr. Reverend.
But homelessness in general is a serious problem. For youth homelessness in particular, I think there are two components of it. There are young people who are homeless with their families, and there are young people who are homeless on their own. And I think you need to treat them a little bit differently. One of the biggest at-risk populations we have is young people who have aged out of foster care. Many of them are homeless. We have a joint project with RCC going right now to build a facility that will house 25 to maybe 30 currently homeless RCC students. In a new facility, they will be offered the services that they need right there on site, whether it's mental health or substance abuse or job training or remedial tutorial sorts of things. So that's a real key for those folks, I think. For homeless children that are living with their families, we have a good but small family shelter that only houses a total of 50 people, and unfortunately, you have to leave during the daytime. So it's a place to sleep and be warm and get fed, but you go out into whatever the weather is during the day. We need better housing for them. Riverside has adopted a Housing First program, which will help provide that. Our goal is to have 400 units over a 5-year period. We're a year in.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone.
Following the unique challenges that my family experienced, my family very well could have been one of those homeless families and had children that very well could have been homeless due to the lack of individuals to fall back on. My family, though, was fortunate that we had a relative to fall back on and a relative to come to in our most dire times. However, many families aren't as fortunate. And so what we need to be doing, what the City Council needs to be doing, is ensuring that we are working more comprehensively with the regional leaders to ensure that we are counting both the sheltered and unsheltered homeless individuals, whether it be families, young people, people of all ages, because what that does is that gives us better data and better numbers. That when we go to report that data both to the state and federal government, that necessary funding allocation is given for the specific need. I recently was having a similar conversation in regards to this question with our county supervisor, in that in many other cities across this county, if you are couch surfing, if you are living in your car, you are not considered in the larger homeless number because you are considered sheltered. We in Riverside look at things a little bit different. When we look at things more comprehensively in terms of our county, we have to ensure that we are working with our various school districts, for example, that have in many cases better knowledge of the uniqueness that many young people are facing in terms of homelessness or food insecurity. That is something that's going to take a comprehensive approach, working with our school districts, working with our county officials to ensure that we are all working towards a common goal and ensuring our numbers are accurate.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
This is such an important question, and it speaks to the need to be able to look at the many faces of homelessness in Riverside and think about how to segment data and tailor services to specific populations of people experiencing homelessness. When it comes to youth homelessness particularly, I have been a part of piloting a program in the past for young people between the ages of 18 and 25 experiencing homelessness. This particular program segmented even further. It was for LGBT youth who had been kicked out of their homes or were afraid to come out to their families. And what this particular program did is it recognized that in this neighborhood there was a large population of homeless LGBT youth. There was also a large population of individuals who were sympathetic to this population who had an extra room in their home. And we know that building another shelter is very expensive and that there are few beds for young people. So what this program did is it paired young people with those extra rooms. Therefore, the host home program was born. So I was a host in this program. The young woman who lived in our house for 8 months moved from her spare bedroom into a college dorm. And meanwhile, while she was living with us, she was able to access many services for mental health to make sure that she was receiving job training. This is a program that will not work for every population experiencing homelessness, but would be a wonderful program to implement here in Riverside for young people experiencing homelessness, and would help us think more innovatively about how we're segmenting these different populations and tailoring services to them that will work well.
Mr. Barcone, let's stay with you. The future's in the room, so here's another question from our audience. As council member, how would you plan to involve youth and students in your decision making?
We have one of our boarding commissions, or a sub boarding commission that we have, is the Youth Council of the City of Riverside, and they work very closely with the mayor's office. During my time in the mayor's office, I was fortunate to work alongside this specific council, and they are made up of all different high school students from all across our city and all the various wards, and they bring their unique experiences that they have faced both back at their schools and in their personal lives, and help with specific youth ran initiatives across our city. One actually instance, which goes back to our previous question, was they were collecting clothing and blankets for young people that were experiencing homelessness. This was a couple of years ago that they were doing this initiative. So I think we have to work more comprehensively with the Youth Council, but as well as we elevate on, as they of course finish high school and progress on and choose to stay here in Riverside, we have to ensure that we are appointing them to the various boards and commissions. I fall back on this because I think it is so critical. I am one of only 3 millennials that serve on a board and commission here in the city of Riverside, when we have roughly 150 board and commission members. This is a disservice to the larger population, and I was fortunate to be one of the ones that was able to break through that barrier, but there are many others that have unique experiences that are not at the decision-making table. And so I commit as a city council person to ensure that those appointments are made and ensure that we are looking at all components of our community, because that is what helps come to a better decision.
All right. Thank you, John and Cheryl. You're doing an excellent job over there. So, Ms. Edwards, how do you plan to involve youth and students in your decision-making as council member?
Something I'll never forget was attending and speaking at a city council meeting to make decisions about a 308,000 square foot warehouse on the north side, which is in Ward 1, directly across the street from the soccer field where children play. And many people spoke at that meeting. I myself spoke at that meeting, but there was no voice more powerful in the room than the voices of two students, high school students, who came and said, we don't want a warehouse in our neighborhood. We want a grocery store. And it occurred to me that their personal stories moved council, moved the audiences more than any one of us. So youth voices are very important because youth are not only our future leaders, they are leading now. On city council, I will include youth in decision-making processes through strong partnerships with RUSD, and also by ensuring that community meetings are as family-friendly as possible. Because when we know that when as adults we're able to bring our children to community meetings, they grow up understanding the processes, knowing the people, and being excited to continue to themselves engage as adults. And I think the most important thing that I can do on city council when it comes to involving youth in decision-making is asking them.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner, I think it's fair to ask you as the incumbent, how do you involve youth and students in your decision-making?
Well, despite the fact that my children are grown and moved out, I know lots of people with younger children. And I talk with them on a regular basis. Some are neighbors, some are friends, some are just people I run into. I regularly visit our schools and talk to the students, talk to the teachers, and ask for their input. What's important to you? What's missing in our city? What do you like about our city? The Mission Inn Foundation, of which I am a board member, has a history education program in the middle schools. And I've participated in that for several years now. I have had a number of interns in my office, much like Mr. Falcone was in the mayor's office. And they learn, I learn, and it's a very helpful process. And maybe the way that I'm most accessible to young people is as I ride around the city on my Segway, and they stop me and say, what is that thing? Oh, you're the mayor, aren't you? And it's an opportunity to talk with young people, and they enjoy it, I enjoy it, and we both learn. I think the more interaction you can have with young people, the better we will all be.
Thank you. You know, I know we have a rule about not applying, but let's give a hand to those young people that came out and did that and asked those questions. Thank you.
Our future looks bright, doesn't it?
Well, I'm going to start with Ms. Edwards on this question, and as national
Impacts, and certainly right here in Riverside. Starting with Ms. Edwards. Riverside has in the past rejected being a sanctuary city. What is your position and why?
I greatly value the contributions of immigrants to this community and all communities. And I believe that what was so damaging about the possibility of discussing the C-54 at the city council level was that it really broke a lot of trust with members of our community, residents here in Riverside. On city council, I will make sure to include all voices and value all voices in decision making. And again, I cannot say enough, value so much the contributions of immigrants here and want to make sure that they feel that they can come and speak at city council and that they can be open about their experiences with council members, with police, with other residents. Because if they can't, then we're building communities that are not safe for any of us.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner?
Thank you. Sanctuary city discussions are challenging ones to have. We, 2 or 3 years ago, had a discussion about whether we should have a discussion about becoming a sanctuary city. And people would bust in to our city from surrounding areas to tell us how horrible we were without knowing where we stood. What really matters, I think, is how you treat people. And in reality, our police department does not inquire as to the citizenship of people they encounter. If you get stopped for running a stop sign, you get cited for that. They look at your driver's license and registration and all that, but they don't inquire about your residency status. That's not the issue that they're interested in. Riverside doesn't operate a jail, so we have nothing to say about when someone who is incarcerated in a jail is released and who is or is not notified that they're about to be released. Our police department does cooperate with other law enforcement agencies if the FBI or ICE, for that matter, comes to our police department and says, we're looking for John Smith, we think he's in your city. Our police department will help try to find that person. So it really is much more how you treat people, being fair and honest and treating people as people than whether you declare yourself a sanctuary city or not.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, your opinion on sanctuary cities and why?
I think this truly is one of the most polarizing issues that we are currently faced with in our larger society. And I was in attendance at that city council meeting several years ago when the topic of the potential of discussing this topic came before the city council. And what I had witnessed is that we had many individuals that were not even from the city of Riverside, in some cases not even from the county of Riverside, that were coming to our city council meeting and voicing their opinion. Their opinion was noted due to the strength of which they came with. However, I think it is important that when we have these discussions, these need to be Riverside-centered discussions. If this is going to be about something that we in Riverside are going to tackle, whichever direction it may come from, it has to be focused on and rooted in making it a decision that we as the community see most fit. I value the contributions of immigrants. My family, just several generations ago, were Italian immigrants and, of course, experienced significant challenges coming from another country to America. And so there has to be that value component as well as acknowledging that many of us come from different walks of life, and that is important. And I think that is a key critical component of the larger discussion. But I think at the bare minimum, this has to be a strictly Riverside discussion. And I think in previous discussions, it has not been that. And we have to ensure that when this does, if it does come before the City Council moving forward, that it is strictly a City of Riverside issue before our City Council.
Very good, thank you. We're going to start, Mr. Gardner, on this question. Important for certainly in Ward 1. Our questioner asked, I support historical preservation and feel it is very important, especially in Ward 1. However, there must be a good balance between historical preservation and new development. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I agree that historic preservation is very important to our city, and most of our historic districts in the city are in Ward 1. Almost all of them are. We have some striking examples of architecture, some of which have been preserved for the long term and will remain as they are. Others of which have been preserved in part, the exterior portions, as a new project comes along. The Imperial Hardware Lofts project is one example. The historic facade of the old Imperial Hardware building was preserved and incorporated into the new building. What I think is a better example is the Stalder project at Mission Inn and Market Street, directly across Market Street from the Fox Theater, where the historic facade has been preserved, will be incorporated in a new building, but the new building will be set back 40 feet on the Mission Inn Avenue side and about 12 feet on the Market Street side. So the new construction will rise above the level of the facade, will look like it is a building coming out of an older building. I've seen things like that in other cities, and it is really striking if it is well done. I think this one will be. A less good example in our downtown is the facade in front of the Food Lab.
Very good. Mr. Falcone, we'll change up to the challengers. So, balancing historical preservation and new development. As council member, how would you help achieve this?
Historic preservation is one of my greatest passions and is one of the areas of my greatest expertise. That is why I serve on the Cultural Heritage Board, which oversees all of our landmarks across the city, as well as various developments in our historic districts. As we said, the vast majority of our historic districts are in fact in Ward 1. I think the historic charm of our downtown, for example, is much of a driver, both an economic engine as well as an attraction of people to our downtown. And we have to ensure that as we grow and develop, that we are maintaining that. I do not believe, however, that the preservation strictly of a facade is enough in terms of historic preservation. If we're just going to maintain a historic facade and get rid of everything behind the facade, it really gives a false sense of history to the larger picture that makes up Riverside. We have to, contrary to that, have to, of course, grow and develop and change. But I believe we can do it in a way that does more than just preserving a facade and developing. There is a better balance there, and I think that is what what is lacking currently in historic preservation discussion. I also would like to add, though, when it comes to our various historic neighborhoods all across the ward, in many cases when we have historic neighborhoods that are well maintained, that are more accurately preserved in their true historical sense, we see heightened property values. We see heightened draw to the various neighborhoods. So I think we here in Riverside are poised with an asset, and that is our historical structures. And we have to ensure that as we grow, we do it in a responsible way.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, as councilperson, how are you going to balance the historical preservation of the new development coming in your opinion?
Well, I'll start by saying that I live in a 1920s home that we purchased and have spent time loving and renovating our own selves, and it's these homes that are actually part of the charm that made us want to buy our first home in Riverside and stay here. I admire the work that's being done by groups like the Old Riverside Foundation, which our family is a member, and also the Renovators Group that tours many historic homes in our city. And I agree that historical preservation and historic homes and sites, these are great assets to our city. And I would like to, well, I think often about the walking tour. I took the Asian American walking tour here, going around different sites downtown and how they are so important to those communities. And I'd love to see work like that continue because, of course, preserving history isn't just about architecture. It's about telling stories of people who have lived here and people who continue to live here. When it comes to balancing with new growth, I do believe that a balance is important. Again, as a city of arts and innovation, we'll have to take risks and think about what our city has looked like, what our city can look like, and how we can tell those stories well, sometimes using elements that are old and sometimes trying things that are new.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So, questioner asks, maintenance around our ward is lacking more than any other part of our city. What can you do, what will you do as a council member to ensure our streets stay clean, are maintained in good order, and including repair of potholes, cracked sidewalks, and dying street trees? Mr. Falcone.
Well, naturally, I have to get this question first because I spoke so much about the importance of infrastructure this evening. I might sound somewhat like a broken record in that regard, but I believe it to be the most critical responsibility of government as we progress and move forward at ensuring Riverside, all across the city, not just Ward 1, has sustainable infrastructure into the future. Through the Measure Z sales tax increase that was passed, infrastructure was one of the selling factors that was sold as one of the things that would be improved based off of Measure Z, and I think we have to continue to push for that. Not enough funding, I believe, was allocated towards that, and we have to continue to advocate for that in terms of improving that. Much of when I speak to the various neighbors, though, all across this ward, they time and time again mention tree trimming, mention dying trees, mention the potholes, and I think it's because this is something that you have direct contact with in your everyday life, and it is something that you look to your local government to ensure is maintained. And over the last several years plus, has not been properly done so. And it's going to come back to what I'm willing to advocate for is that we have greater funding allocated for infrastructure needs, for that tree trimming need, for the sidewalk repairs. It's very important and something I'm very passionate about and willing to advocate for on the City Council.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
Would you actually mind repeating the question? I didn't hear the first sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so our questioner asked and states that maintenance around our Ward 1 is lacking more so than any other parts of our city. What can we do, or what will you do as a council member to ensure our streets stay clean, are maintained, including repair of potholes, cracked sidewalks, and dying street trees?
Thank you. Well, the data backs up the concern in this question. When you look at the index of our streets between 0 and 100, the streets in Riverside right now fall at number 61, which means that we have some work to do on our streets. And if funding levels remain the same for our streets, we'll be falling into the 50s in a very short period of time. So we do need to think carefully as a city about how we can allocate resources to our streets, which is one of our longest resources if you look at it by the numbers. And the way we can do this, and I know this was a discussion at City Council last night, thinking about how we can allocate more money so we don't see continued degradation of our streets. But it's not just about allocating more funding, it's about being even more efficient with the funding that we have. So, for example, not to think about our practice of when we approach certain streets and redo them. Do we do the worst streets first, which has been proven not to actually be the best practice, or do we think about continued maintenance of streets so we're not trying to fix a very expensive and bad problem, but instead being on top of issues before they even arise? And also, when we look at, for example, a neighbor in the Wood Street told me the curb needed to be redone and the street needed to be reslurried. The street was reslurried, then the curb was done, and when the trucks came in to do the curb, then the street needed to be reslurried again. So if we can look at how to be more efficient with our resources, that can help us have more money to approach infrastructure.
Mr. Gardner?
It is a significant issue for us, and as I said earlier, I think the council made a mistake in allocating as much money to financial housekeeping early on in the Measure Z cash flow, and less to the public services that we all want and need on a daily basis. We have taken some steps to improve that. Last year, we doubled our tree trimming budget. It's still not enough, but we are now on about a 7-year cycle. We were at about a 9-year cycle. For hardwood trees, 3 to 5 years is the ideal trimming cycle for the health and look of the tree. Palms, of course, would be nice to trim every year. We'll never get to trimming palms every year, but we can get back to 3 to 5 years on the main street trees. Last night, the council did, on my motion, vote to add an additional $1.5 million a year in Measure Z funding to our citywide street maintenance budget. So that's going to begin to make a difference. We also are sending to our transportation committee a look at, there's an additional block of money in Measure Z. There's kind of a reserve fund in the Measure Z funding, and we have fairly high reserve funds in the general fund. One of the things that will be looked at by Transportation Committee is, can we take any of those dollars and move them into street maintenance, and if so, how much?
Ms. Buckman? No, that's it, I'm sorry.
I'll answer twice.
I know you would like to. Well, let's get to the macro. This is something facing all of California and certainly facing our city. There's a problem with our unfunded liability on the public employees retirement system. I believe it's between 500 and 600 million for Riverside. So starting with Ms. Edwards, as our councilperson, how are you planning to address the unfunded PERS liability of the city of Riverside?
There will not be one answer to this. There will be a menu of options and thinking about which within this menu of options makes sense for our city and when. So for example, thinking about how to pay down the most expensive debt first, how to look at city subsidies, how to look at land we own in the city and be thoughtful about what we need to own, what we need to fund. Each of these alone could be a drop in the bucket, but put together and done well could really help us address the unfunded pension liability. It's important to me that on City Council, while addressing the pension, which is of course an enormous challenge and priority in this 5-year term, we're also not letting ourselves be paralyzed by the need to meet the promises, and I do believe we do need to keep the promises that have been kept, but we can't let ourselves be paralyzed by this unfunded liability. We have a city to run, and if we look at our budget in 5 years, we're in the red within 2. So we have to think about how, as an entire city, we're budgeting differently. Looking at, for example, priority-based budgeting, deciding what our priorities are as a city and lining up all of the budget line items underneath those priorities to help us make decisions about what is most important for us to address now. And also thinking about hiring a grant writer in our city, which sounds like a small thing, but would make a big difference. Now, each individual department has to find funding on their own. If we had a grant writer, it would help us ensure that we're not leaving money on the table.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Gardner, the unfunded PERS liability.
Well, first, it's important to understand where this came from. A big piece of it actually lies with the board that operates the statewide pension system. They made 3 really serious mistakes in their forecasts. They forecast they would make more money on their investments than they did. They forecast that employees would work longer to an older age than they do. And they forecast that they would not live as long after retiring as in fact they do. All of those put together means that every employee, no matter how big or small their pension is, draws more money of that pension because they started earlier and they live longer. And they're not making as much money on the investment side. So we have to make up for that. It's $500+ million, but it's over 20 years. It's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's not next year. So we have some time to deal with this. We've made some changes already. All but our public safety employees are paying 100% of their share of the pension cost. Public safety will be paying it within the next year. There's a new formula for all new employees. They retire at a later age, they get a lower percentage of their highest salary, and the salary, instead of being a single year, highest paid year, is their highest paid 3-year average. We need to look at, I'm out of time, sorry, it's a really important topic.
Yes, thank you. It is an important topic. Mr. Falcone, please tell us about it.
I definitely want to start with mentioning that it is important not to dismiss or disregard the importance of funding the accrued pension liability, and that is a contractual obligation that the city has gone into with various city employees, and it is important to appreciate the city employees for their various forms of service in which they provide the city. That being said, we have to ensure that long-term prudent fiscal decisions are being made to enable the city to maintain a reliable and sustainable fiscal path moving forward. So that's going to mean a multi-pronged approach in many different regards. It is true that there is not one specific answer to this because there is a significant amount that continues to climb as we head towards 2032. And that 2032, it's still there, but it begins to plateau a little bit more so. So we have to ensure that, yes, we are looking at this in the long term and maintaining fiscal prudency to help address this, but there isn't going to be one specific thing. The city staff has put forward various options. I think it is important for the new city council to debate and discuss these different options of what makes the most sense for the initial debt that we have to pay back over the course of the next 5 years, and then that next piece, the ensuring the longer term component. So it's going to be a mixture of different things, and we have to work together comprehensively with the fellow council people and the staff to ensure that fiscal prudency is always at the core of this.
Thank you, sir. Well, with development, as we talked about in the downtown, of course, is the heart of Riverside. On that comes traffic, and traffic management is very important. I'd like you to talk about, starting Mr. Gardner, how we work on traffic management in the downtown, and because our neighbors and from Grand Avenue are here, would you discuss how we can do more to enforce the speed limit on Grand Avenue?
Well, enforcing the speed limit on Grand Avenue is pretty easy. You put a radar officer out there, and they write tickets. And we do that periodically. There aren't enough of them to have somebody stationed there as long as anybody would like them to be. We have a speeding problem on most of our streets. My street's got a 25-mile-an-hour limit on it, and people don't drive just 25 miles an hour. Magnolia has a bad problem. Traffic is a growing problem in our city for a number of reasons. We had quite a bit that was being pushed off the freeway during construction. We're over that now, but people got into the habit of driving down some of our major streets to avoid congestion on the freeway, and they've not gotten back into the habit of getting on the freeway. We have to try to get them to do that again. Freeway's not great, but it's often better than our downtown city streets. We do have a traffic management plan that includes synchronizing streetlights, stoplights, to improve traffic flow on the main thoroughfares. The drawback is that slows traffic that crosses the main streets. So you've got to find that balance, and it's not an easy thing to do. We are transitioning into more public transit use, less single vehicle, single occupant vehicle use. That's, I think, a good thing for our city, and it will help with this problem as time goes on. We need to continue to try to get people to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Mr. Falcone?
I do believe that, of course, it is easy to say and to indicate that we need more patrol officers enforcing the various speed limits, but the fact of the matter is that hasn't been happening. So it is easy to say it, but it does not translate. It has not been translating for a number of years, in particular down Grand Avenue. So I think that is, of course, one component, and that's why we have to have that enforcement piece of it. But we also have to look at when we talk about the synchronization of the various street lights and street signals all across downtown or across the larger portion of the city. When you're driving down Market at 5 p.m. on a weekday, I was just talking to a neighbor about this day before yesterday. When you're driving down Market at 5 p.m. on a weekday, you shouldn't be going from block to block being stopped every single light. Now, while yes, you do have to have that cross-traffic flow, however, Market, one of the busiest streets in our entire city, especially at 5 p.m. on a workday, I think that should be our utmost priority in terms of synchronizing. If there was any street in our downtown that needs to be synchronized, it's Market. And I think that's something that we have to see leadership on, besides just saying that it's complicated or saying that, there's a plan in place. We have to get some results in this regard, both from the enforcement down Grand Avenue, Magnolia, whatever the street may be, as well as the synchronization of our various street light stop signals.
Ms. Edwards?
Traffic on residential streets, particularly traffic from vehicles that were never meant to go down residential streets, really is an issue in Riverside, and it's across the board. And I know this from early days of dropping my baby off at daycare. You would park, open the door, and just pray that the door to the car wouldn't come flying off as you were getting out to try to take the baby out and into daycare. So this is an issue, and that's on a street where we even have signs saying that there are axle restrictions. So it is an enforcement issue, and what is being done now really isn't enough to address the problem, and this is something that I hear from residents around the ward. So of course we need better enforcement. We need to have consistent rules across the city about what streets can have speed bumps, for example, what streets are being enforced. And I know that this is a long-term solution, it's not a short-term one, but the best way to decrease traffic is to decrease the number of people who need their cars. And the best way we can do that as a city is to ensure that we're home-growing jobs here so that people can live and work in the same place and don't need to jump in their car every day. That, again, that we have walkable communities so you can go to the grocery store without needing to jump in your car. You can go see your friends and neighbors without needing to jump in the car. And I do hope that that's where we're going as a city. And we are growing. So with that, we need to remember that a bit of traffic is inevitable for a growing city. The question is how we manage it thoughtfully.
Thank you. I've been told we have one more question before closing statements. So let's move to this question. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Falcone. And I'd like you to tell us of your two challengers, about both of them. Give me two attributes that you admire about each one of them.
Okay. A great question to ultimately end on this evening. We end on a positive note. I think two positive things of each.
Yes, sir.
The first of Mr. Gardner, I will acknowledge that he has dedicated a lot of service to this community. 12 years serving on our city council, Councilmember Gardner has dedicated much service, time and energy to this community, and that is an admirable trait. The second thing, I think it is a valuable resource to have your council person's cell phone number if something were to pop up that you would need to get a hold of someone. So I do commend him for giving out his personal cell phone number for the community to use. Two, in terms of Ms. Edwards, I think it is important that we have and bring diverse viewpoints to the table, and I think that she does bring a viewpoint that has not previously been represented on our city council. Secondly, I think that she has proven to be dedicated to this ward by being very willing to talk to various neighbors about specific concerns that they have. I think that is important of any council person.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Edwards, two attributes that you admire about your two fellow candidates.
Absolutely. I'll start Phyllis here, who's here closest to me. I really admire the work that you're doing on the commission with historic preservation, and I think I can tell that it's your passion. I think that this is extraordinary. Also, being a young person who's so engaged in politics, this is very admirable. Mike, I also admire 12 years of service to a city, and the fact that you know the names of so many people here. I think that's very impressive.
And Mr. Gardner, two attributes about the your candidates, your fellow challengers.
Well, thank you. Let me start with Ms. Edwards. I admire that you came to our city from another city and elected to stay here. And you bought a house here. You started a family here. You're raising your family here. And it's obvious that you care a great deal about our city. And I have to admire anybody who will put in the time and effort to run for city council or any elected office. It's hard work, it's grueling, sometimes it's not very fun, but it takes a committed person to do that. And both of these individuals are doing that. They work really hard in their campaigning. They care deeply about our city. Specifically about Philip, I really admire your enthusiasm, your energy. I think you are going to be a great public servant. Just not quite yet. I do also, I do truly appreciate your interest and your knowledge in historic preservation and what that means to our city and your commitment to that.
Thank you. So now we go to our closing statements. Wouldn't that be a great question for a presidential debate? I believe our closing statements, we're going to start with Ms. Edwards and then go to Mr. Gardner and Mr. Falcone. These are 1-minute closing statements. Ms. Edwards.
Riverside is the city where our family purchased our first home, where we've chosen to raise our family. I'm on the board of the Riverside Downtown Partnership and am a member of many neighborhood groups in Ward 1. I'm eager to serve on Riverside City Council to address homelessness, to invest in neighborhoods, and to ensure that Riverside is a city where everyone can thrive. Our city works best when we combine attention to detail in the short term with vision for the long term. I have the skills to bring both. Now is the time for leadership, for vision, and for fresh ideas. My campaign has been endorsed by Congressman Mark Takano, by Assembly Members Medina and Cervantes, the nurses of Riverside Community Hospital, and among others, local neighborhood leaders, both lifelong Riversiders and those who have chosen to invest in and make Riverside their home. I look forward to future conversations and I hope to earn your vote.
Mr. Gardner, closing statement, please.
Thank you. I think through the course of the evening, you had an opportunity to see how each of us handles sometimes challenging questions get a feel for what we do and don't know. I don't think there's any question but that all three of us are very committed to this and to serving you. The job for you is to decide who will serve you best. And again, I would ask you the question that I mentioned earlier. Have I served you well in the past 12 years? Have I done anything that demands that I be replaced? If you think I've not served you well, or you think I've done something that demands that I be replaced, then there are two very interested people sitting just to my left who would be happy to have my job. I am endorsed by Mayor Bailey, by all 6 members of our city council, by Supervisors Spiegel, Jeffries, and Hewitt, by our police and fire associations. And I'm out of time.
And Mr. Falcone, closing statement.
Thank you all for attending this evening. Many of the topics tonight have been long-time, persistent problems that we all have faced, problems that oftentimes fall through the cracks and go unaddressed by current leadership. Instead of short-sighted approaches and short-term solutions, I offer the fresh, forward-thinking approach to achieve lasting results. I will improve long-term planning to proactively replace our chronically deferred infrastructure. I will partner with the county and neighboring cities to address underlying causes of homelessness. I will support developing responsibly to grow our local economy that provides high-quality jobs while preserving our city's character. I'm the only candidate before you tonight that is truly a product of this community. I mentioned that in my opening statement. I was raised in this neighborhood, attended local schools, was fortunate to work in City Hall, serve as a city commissioner, and I have the dedication, decision-making abilities, and unique knowledge to lead this ward and city through vastly modernizing times. I look forward to receiving your vote on or before June 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we hear from our candidates? And on behalf of Grand Alliance Neighborhood Alliance, we want to thank Trinity Lutheran Church for hosting us, and I know so the candidates. Thank you very much. Ward 1, you have an interesting election coming up. Don't forget the ballots drop very soon. And I can just tell you, I'm proud as a citizen that you have 3 fine candidates, and you're very fortunate for leadership. Thank you. I'm Tom Hunt. Good night.